During the past week, we have been closely monitoring outbreaks and imposing mitigation efforts on a, as you know, county-by-county basis. So today I'm announcing that we'll be extending our mitigation efforts across the entire Commonwealth. This isn't a decision that I take lightly at all. It's one that I'm making because medical experts believe it is the only way we can prevent our hospitals from being overwhelmed by patients. This decision was made in conjunction with officials at all levels. Effective at midnight, all non-essential stores are to close in Pennsylvania, as well as bars and restaurants except for takeout.
COVID happening, it just completely seems like it's cut the legs off of this industry big time.
You can't see people, you can't be indoors. Everything about restaurants and bars is everything that they're telling you not to do.
You can't socialize, you can't go out, you can't.
Yeah, and those are the greatest parts, it's hospitality. You can't be hospitable.
I don't think downtown's gonna come back for 2 years. It's a ghost town. I call it zombie land.
So I moved to Pittsburgh in 2010, and it was right when things in this kind of new wave of Pittsburgh dining really started to happen. So Salt of the Earth had just opened, Spoon was going on. So it just started growing and growing, and I started writing about drinks at first, and you saw with the craft cocktail bartenders, everything really taking off. And with breweries, I remember at one point, every time a brewery opened, it was a story. And then at another point, it was like, whoa, there's so many breweries that it's not news necessarily if something opens. And when I started writing about restaurants, it was the same thing. People had this dynamic, creative energy, and there was a real buzz in the city. And I think, up through this entire decade, you really just started seeing things growing and things being really exciting. And it was just, Pittsburgh, was extraordinarily fun place to dine out and to go out for drinks, and it became a really great place to just have an evening or have people come in from neighboring cities, even from Toronto or New York, and it was a real city that you could get a grip on what was going on in not too long a time, but also never get bored really.
I moved to Pittsburgh 12 years ago, and I was a 22-year-old girl coming straight from Puerto Rico. The industry was really tight. For me, I feel like I was just welcome. I feel like those years to me were the golden years of the industry in Pittsburgh, mostly because the people that are running the best restaurants in town right now, we were all friends. And we used to hang out, and we used to go to Kelly's, and we used to do so many fundraisers. And we all grew up to run our own businesses. But to me, the city has always offered this sense of comfort and community and just people just being there for you.
So Mindful Hospitality Group is a hospitality company. It says it right there in the name. But we are a bar consulting, education, and private events company based in Pittsburgh.
Months leading up to COVID, right after the start of 2020, we saw kind of a projection of we were going to really be able to ramp up production of things and events. So we were in nonstop meetings, taking so many kind of client interviews and kind of preparing to see, as a company going into a half-year point, some success and actually kind of come to, fruition of all our work. And then, the date now that will go down in infamy, March 15th, kind of literally grinded that all to a halt.
As COVID started to happen and things started to shut down around St. Patrick's Day, one of the biggest drinking days of the year, people were getting really, really nervous, really scared. You know, you had the one group that was thinking it was the end of the world and, you know, drink yourself under the table, and then you had the other group that was just like really, you know, unsure of what this was going to be.
Yeah, so I just remember like week after week, oh, it's just going to be another week of this. Oh, it's just going to be another 2 weeks of this. Everything's going to be fine. Once I started having to cut servers from their shifts and cut bartenders and started making phone calls and cutting the schedule, I really realized that this was going to be really bad.
And I remember the plan was to go to Spoon, back to Spoon, to just consult and help Brian and just be there. That was the backup plan. I went in to talk to Brian, and that's when like it hit me. He was like, I don't know what's gonna happen, Jamilka, so let's just like touch base in a couple weeks and figure it out. And I went to Puerto Rico mostly because, again, I was like jobless and had some, you know, I had just broken up with my boyfriend and just wanted to spend time home. And when I touched down, like when I like flew into Puerto Rico, everything was 100% shut down. So you were not even able to like leave your house. Like if you did, it was like a $5,000 fine.
For us, it came as quite a shock. I mean, we were maybe like a week away from closing when it was really starting to hit Pittsburgh, and it was only honestly about, you know, a week from when it started getting scary to when they shut down the whole system, and we were out of work for 3 months.
So that Sunday, reservation after reservation was canceling. It was just the writing on the wall was coming. People were getting fearful to come out before the state had even shut everything down. So my restaurant had closed at 7 because of lack of business. There was no point in keeping any of us there any longer. As I was on the bus from downtown here is when they announced that bars and restaurants could no longer be open, that the shutdown was happening at 12:01 that night. So as I was getting off the bus, I came in and informed everyone at Brewers that that was it, that at 12:01 we were done.
Okay. So whenever it was first announced that like everything was going to close, I thought that it was going to be like swine flu. I thought it was going to be like, you know, maybe a month-long thing. And, you know, it would all blow over and maybe the US would get like 5-7 deaths and that would be like the extent of it. So I was just kind of like doubting.
After all this started, it took a while for everything to settle in, but the first few days, all the craziness was happening. It was unimaginably busy. If you've ever gone into a grocery store like on Christmas Eve or the day before Christmas Eve, it was worse than that. And this was for about 3 days straight. And then all of a sudden the bottom just fell out and we saw our sales decline by over half of what we normally did.
When the restaurants started to shut down, I think no one really had a sense at first of how long this was going to last, how bad it was going to be, what was going to happen. And so places shut down or tried to do takeout, and then you started seeing in phases people trying to adapt. And I think for the first couple of months, it was an adaptation with a shorter term outlook. Like, okay, if we can turn ourselves into like maybe a high-end grocery store or do some special takeout, you know, we can get through this.
My first reaction is let's stay open until they tell us we have to shut down. And then in my head, I was actually thinking maybe I should do a speakeasy, but I didn't want to lose my liquor license, so that didn't happen.
And then as the months lingered on, I think as the second wave or like the kind of bump, I don't know what you would call it, happened after Memorial Day weekend in June. And then it became clear that this was going to last a lot longer. Since then, I think you've seen like a little bit more of a crisis and a little bit more of a how are we going to adapt and how are we going to get through for what is now, I think everyone believes is an unknown period of time, and no one really knows how long this is going to last now.
Some people probably didn't really know how long this is going to last. Like, well, we'll ride out the wave as long as we can.
Yeah, they kept saying 2 weeks. We're just gonna be closed for 2 weeks. And
I don't think anybody had any idea the magnitude of what this was going to be. I mean, if you look back at a lot of what the media was saying from January up to March, it was, this is going to pass. This is not going to be a long-standing thing. We'll get through this. And by, end of March, you realize, no, it's a thing. It's going to survive. And even with that, I don't think people pivoted right away just because you would have to change your whole model, your whole dynamic.
I'm a bit of a loophole guy. I like to find the loopholes in everything. So one of the things was, how can I do outdoor seating if we can't have any indoor seating? Because at the time, there was no indoor seating allowed. I approached the Benedum Theater and the Pittsburgh Downtown Partnership and was like, hey, if they're closed, can we use in front of there? And so we had outdoor seating that gives us the whole block. And actually, with the outdoor seating, we have more actual seating than we do when we're open normally now.
We were pushing for this goal to be a really elegant, fine dining establishment, and it didn't make much sense for us to take that step back and just start doing takeout of pizza or burgers or whatever. So we just decided it was just best to just shut it down for a while, which, really kind of sucked because we were like right on the cusp of being, Pittsburgh's finest dining destination. And all this happened right as we were in our full stride. It was probably, we've been there for about 4 years. And it was probably the first couple months that we were actually making money. The restaurant industry, it's a long, hard road to get to the point where you're actually making money. And we were finally there.
We're Eros and Chris from Who Cooks Free Farm. We have an organic vegetable farm and we grow everything we can grow except corn. And when COVID-19 happened, we were selling 50% of our sales were to restaurants and 50% were to the farmers market. And at that point, we had been warned by people in the medical world that it was a really big deal to take it very seriously and consider our business plan. And we had restaurants calling us saying they were closing that had been buying from us in that moment. So our software that we have online working with chefs ordering, we transitioned that quickly into selling to the public. Some of our restaurants, some reached out and some we heard it was just quiet. And we let it be quiet because it's a really intense time for us and them. And about 98% of those restaurants aren't buying from us anymore. They are closed. Out of our top 10, we just have one person that's able to work with us still.
Honestly, it was really hard to even wrap your head around that something was even really happening like this, and that the effects were going to be as dramatic and overnight. But the idea was that, okay, this is going to be a rough year. If this is actually going to linger, which I kind of honestly didn't really feel like it was going to. It's just never experienced anything like this. And it was, but it's been extremely humbling and, even still, it's still hard for us to even figure out where we're going with anything, because what we did was we shifted quickly and it worked out okay. But there's a lot to figure out, because who wants to have a business that's constantly having to shift so dramatically, where you're unsure if the following season you're not going to be able to pay your bills, you're not going to be able to pay your employees, and you're not going to be able to continue doing something that you love. But most importantly, that we can't continue to provide for the communities that we serve that absolutely rely on us, and they want us to keep coming and bring food, but we have to be able to pay our bills, And so once 50% of your gross sales is completely cut out overnight, then, you really have to try to figure out where you're going to go. And that is still something that we're constantly grappling with, and we're finding it hard to sort of piece it all together. That's really tough. And so we're trying to find time to have meetings and figure out where we're going to go. And what seems like the best route forward at this point,
We were able to save our ass this year by taking on the Family Food Box Share Program from the USDA. We've packed 900 boxes a week of food for low-income families and made just one-stop distribution of, like, we did 500 boxes somewhere, and we did 250 boxes somewhere, and then 150 somewhere else. So it was a really big saving grace to having a lot of food that didn't necessarily have a home with all the restaurants gone. And then we also had already previously in January and December coordinated a new customer or collaboration with Harvey Farms Pittsburgh, which is like a home delivery to people. So that was also, that customer has really taken up the space of sort of a more like a wholesale buyer. So we have had a cushion this year, but we don't know about our future. We don't know if the USDA food box program is going to be here. And that was a big part of the wholesale for us this summer. So figuring out that next step, we can grow a lot of food, who's going to be the buyer. We want to be here for chefs. We're still selling to chefs, but it's just not sure of where it's going to be, what their level will be
feels
of buying
precarious.
power. Yeah.
A precarious way forward. If that can be shut down, that really gives me cold feet, big time. Because you do a lot of work out here and you make whatever you make, but if you do all the work and you have all the investment and you can't sell your stuff, that hurts. And none of this stuff sticks around. Everything that we grow, a majority of what we grow is in for a short amount of time, and we need to get rid of it quickly. And so there's no waiting. There's no waiting period. We don't have that luxury to have a good that you can sit on. If your sales aren't great,
No shelf life, basically.
yeah, it just sits on the shelf for 6 months. We have 5 days max, usually for most things, honestly. So, yeah. So it gives me cold feet to push forward, or even just to sit back and wait and be like, I hope it all goes away, and that the restaurant scene will just bounce back and just everybody will be like, yay! And we hope that happens. But I feel like this is a little bit of a wake-up call, honestly. And just as a business, not that we wouldn't want to continue with chefs and restaurants, we certainly will, but this was a little scary, man.
But I think it's been really challenging in that there isn't any federal government financial support. There was the PPP, which helped, but that was a very short-term thing, which I think, and at the time being, was like, maybe this is going to be a short-term thing. So that was enough to get us through.
So that money was gone as soon as we got it. There needs to be some kind of help from the government for restaurants and in any small business. There needs to be more help for the small businesses. These major chains are getting thousands of dollars, and the small businesses are just going out of business. They're not dying. They're going out of business, not by any fault of their own.
We applied, took forever to get our PPP loan, but ultimately when we got it, we had little options. You had 8 weeks to spend the money. You had to spend 75% on your staff, but you couldn't just spend that 75% on like 2 or 3 people. You had to get on the same amount of staff that you had before. And then if you didn't spend the money on that, then basically we'd have to take that on as debt with an interest rate for paying it back and everything. It wasn't a grant anymore, it became a loan.
It was exciting when we were able to open back up. From the PPP loan, a lot of places were trying to bring back their employees. They just needed people to come back. Even if you weren't physically in the restaurant, you would be put on payroll so that things didn't screw up with the PPP loan, so that it wouldn't go into default, so it wouldn't be owed back. And this happened with many, many people that I talked to within the industry, whether they be bar managers, bartenders, servers. We all were faced with are you comfortable coming back? it almost felt that you had to.
The PPP loans just came out as a thing where restaurants were like, okay, we'll be able to go back to this and get a staff, and it just became one thing after the other that kind of kept throwing people off their understanding without getting the footing down of, here's what the narrative is. A lot of other businesses were, I think, stabilized right away, where our industry, there was no stabilization. I don't think there still is a stabilization. Every day, every week, we look for the news and see what's happening down in Harrisburg, and that can drastically shift our business, 180 degrees in that matter of time.
With the PPP expiring, with the enhanced unemployment expiring, now people are really in a pickle, and I think there isn't that leadership from the federal government to get things through it. I think with the state government, it's reacting to the situation and doing as best as they can, and just trying to find a balance. I think you have to err on the side of safety.
There are going to be 3 phases: red, yellow, and green. We're currently, obviously, in the red phase statewide, with only life-sustaining businesses operating and Pennsylvanians staying at home.
Overall, the Wolf administration did a pretty good job, considering that this is a novel virus, and for the first couple months, people weren't even really sure how it was spread or how virulent it was going to be or what to do. And I think, throughout this, I think the biggest mistake, was the kind of red, yellow, green spotlight traffic light thing. And then when it went to green, people thought, oh, everything's cool. Even though if you looked at the actual wording of green, it was like, everything isn't cool. It's just a little bit less restrictive.
I think the biggest mistake was whomever decided to give it those colors, because green to people when Allegheny County went to green meant, okay, it's cool to do whatever now. We're safe, everything is normal, and it's not. It was just saying, hey, we can kind of go back to our lives as normal, and that was really when, shit hit the fan. Sorry, I can't think of a better way to say that right now, but that was a huge blow, because some businesses decided that they were going to go for that cash grab, and that they were going to stuff as many people and into tiny places as they could and make up for this lost revenue. And there's definitely a portion of the population that doesn't believe that this is real and that they're never going to get it. So they would take all of those people. And then there was the other people who took time took even after 2 weeks after being in green, take time to put safety precautions into place and bring back their staff, come up with ways that they were going to go about everything in a very safe way and make the people, their guests, but also their employees feel safe. And they bought all this product and they brought in all this inventory. And then because of all the people who decided not to abide by the rules, whether they liked it or not, then Allegheny County said, well, you're now completely shut down. And I personally think that to businesses was a bigger blow than the initial shutdown of COVID.
I actually just want to say this too, because I think there are restaurants and restaurant owners that decided that the rules didn't apply to them. And I just want to say that people that do that are really despicable. And to decide that you have some sort of quest against tyranny or a quest against public health because you're hurting, I get it, it sucks, it is scary to not know what your restaurant is, but I think people that did that, I think one of the things this really did was shake out who actually cares about the city, who cares about their employees, and who cares about public health and who doesn't.
I would drive through Southside every night, and I remember those first couple weekends driving through Southside and just lines of people outside the bars. No social distancing. The bars were jam-packed. They weren't only past the state-mandated capacity, they were beyond their own personal capacity. In some regards, a lot of animosity towards those bar owners and those restaurant owners who just ignored the rules and flaunted the rules and made people like us who were following the rules and trying to make sure that our guests and our staff were safe. They put us out of business for another month, when we did reopen, we made sure that we were doing above and beyond the expectation to keep our guests and our staff safe. And, we're doing all the things that really every restaurant should be doing. Masks are worn all the time. Our kitchen staff and our bartenders wear gloves whenever making cocktails or preparing food. We have sanitizer all over the restaurant. Little things like having water glasses on the table when the guest sits down. We now keep those off the table so that there is no aerosol contamination that can happen. Same thing with silverware, napkins. You basically sit down now at a completely empty table with one sanitizer spray bottle on the table for every guest that they can use and spray their hands whenever they want. We went to a captain style of service so that there's really only one person who is greeting the table, talking to the table, and then he is supported by a back waiters who will deliver food. So they're the only ones who are carrying the food over the tables and clearing the plates. Social distancing, we removed tables from the floor. We have our bar, which seats 10 people. We have a kitchen counter, which seats 10 people. We just took those completely out. Also, the kitchen counter did not give proper distance between the cooks and the guest as well, so we figured that was probably best just to get rid of that for the time being. 25% for us, for Spork, means 12 guests at a time in the building. So that's not a lot of, you can't make any money that way.
Because we are always so go, restaurants are open 7 days a week. You're serving brunch, lunch, dinner, and then kind of grinding to a halt. I think a lot of people had to finally step back and take some time for themselves, which is, something that I think people who are givers and people who take care of other people don't often do, which is, I think a majority of people in the service industry is that people really have a genuine sense of wanting to take care of somebody else. And now they were allowed to kind of focus in on themselves.
Unfortunately, a lot of people didn't want to come back because they were on vacation, basically getting paid to camp and enjoy life, which I can understand. That some of them are making more money with the stimulus and their unemployment than they were working.
Once, the unemployment benefits came into effect and, everyone was getting the extra $600, that was less of a potent issue. I realized that I had all the resources that I had been wanting for such a long time, which was time and money. I believe it was like mid-June, I decided to go on a road trip. And I visited 16 states. I drove from Pittsburgh all the way to Washington, down through Oregon, California, then through Nevada back. And I knew that it was risky for me to leave, but I had no obligations when I left. There was no set time that I would be back to work. We didn't know.
I've also gotten the opportunity to be more creative, and I've been writing, I've been hiking, I've been, trying to do a little bit more stand up and things. This is such a nice break as well, to just kind of clear my mind, to kind of, just regroup and do all of this stuff, that it's been so nice that I don't want to go back to the same old working 50 to 60 hours a week, busting my ass, running around, being, not getting home till 3 a.m, being exhausted until 1 or 2 the next day, and then having to do it again.
And I've really enjoyed seeing certain individuals kind of come into their own and figuring out a lot of things for themselves personally, professionally, and I think with that, people also have been very encouraging of that.
So it's finding ways to, one, celebrate small things. So, a new restaurant opening is exciting in the middle of this.
Was this place even a thought when you left for Puerto Rico?
No.
So how did this whole opportunity?
Yeah, we're hopefully opening a restaurant in the middle of a pandemic. It's gonna be a fun cafe in Etna.
I've always been looking at restaurants. That's always been like on the back of my mind, but I was always like kind of really scared to do so. But I did a Zoom call with a couple of female chefs that we have been doing like for the last 4 years, fundraisers in like Lexington, Kentucky. And all of these women are not only chefs, but they're like, you know, they run their own 6, 7, 8 restaurants. They're like these powerhouses. And we had a Zoom conference, and everybody was talking about like what they were doing. It's like, oh yeah, like I have no job, so I don't know what to tell you. And one of them was literally like, Jamilka, you need your own restaurant, and if you don't do it, like I am offering to open a restaurant for you in Lexington, Kentucky under my umbrella. So just like that idea of like somebody believing in me so much, just being like, oh shit, like okay, like maybe I have to like truly be a little more confident in the fact that I can do this. And that was it. It was that phone call of someone who I respect so much and I look up to, the fact that she believed in me enough to do something along those lines. And then when we look at this space, when we walk through the space, there was a certain charm that reminded me of Old Legume, and I definitely romanticized those days. It's like, this is it. It's like, this is gonna be a 30-seat restaurant max. I can see the dining room and the front from the kitchen. This can be the place that I always wanted, where I can talk to my guests, where I can cook, where my staff is family and it's small and we take care of each other. I'm not rushing to open anytime soon. Like I prefer to just keep doing events and doing like private dinners, and just make sure that my staff is comfortable when we open. Like it's just, that's like the number one issue. It's just like, how is your staff like feels about it? Like I don't want to put my people in a situation where they don't feel comfortable talking to customers or being in interaction with people in and out. So yeah, just like trying to figure that out. And as I said, like every day is completely like I change my mind about like what is the next step, when are we gonna open. Things keep changing, so yeah, we're trying. Everything has taken longer than expected. Everything's been a little harder than you would imagine, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the amazing things that is actually not surprising about Pittsburgh, and certainly not surprising about the restaurant industry in Pittsburgh, is that community is really coming together. So early on, you saw the Warren do free meals for service industry employees for, I don't know if it was like 2 months or 3 months. I mean, every night they were giving away free meals, which was really incredible.
So we're like, all right, let's do a meal. So I called these reps and got 2 or 3 weeks worth of sponsorships, and we had it covered. We did free meals. We were like, oh, we'll probably do 50 to 100 meals. So we started off as doing these free meals, and it was just to anyone. And a lot of people felt bad coming in for them, but they didn't have. Some of them never got their last paychecks. Some of them hadn't had jobs, or I know some people who just left their job going to start a new one and never got to start it, so they have zero income for how long. There was no unemployment, or the stimulus package hadn't gone through, or any of that. So then we started, and it kept increasing, and then all of a sudden we realized we got all these chefs and restaurants that were suddenly closing and donating us all of their stuff. Like Point Bruges gave us like 150 pounds of mussels, and we're just like, all right, that's what our meal's gonna be based with. And it was great for the support from them, but it also was kind of depressing to see these restaurants closing. And I didn't think a thing of it, because I was just like, oh, it's only gonna be a couple weeks at the time. So then we kind of kept doing the meals, and 3 months later we were still doing the meals and everything was still closed, which was very depressing. But we got a ton of support from everyone in the industry and that type of thing. So a lot of people would come in for the meals, would grab a beer, so that helped cover our cost of all the meals. And we got like Atria's donated tons of food and all that type of stuff. And then it just, chefs came in and helped volunteer to cook, and Like, so like Dave and Noya, they did their prepackaged meals, and at the end, every Sunday they would donate whatever didn't sell, and we could use that night. So we called it like Sauce Sundays. And we used like Noya as a base, and then kind of had our chef tweak it to what we had, because it wasn't enough to feed all the people, but we were getting up to 200 meals and a day at that point, and we're just like, had to figure it out.
Well, Station has, been a pretty busy restaurant. We opened in 2015, and it was just a normal restaurant. I mean, it was what you'd expect. I mean, it's the best restaurant I've ever worked in. Curtis Gamble is an amazing chef, and I love learning from him. But whenever the quarantine hit, everything really changed at the restaurant. Curtis is still there and we're still learning. It's still a fun environment, but, we cut our staff by 2/3, there's only 4 or 5 of us there now. And, I don't know, it's weird to think about how it was before, because I don't think I have, actually. I probably did at the beginning of the quarantine, and that made me really upset because I knew that it wouldn't be that way again. Whenever normal we get, it's not going to be the way it was.
I don't know how it's ever possible to completely go back to normal.
What I hope for after all this, through all this, is that we can all take a look at inequalities between back of house and front of house, of gender, of race. Even before this, I think a lot of those issues have come to light, and much like all the other hot button topics of 2020 that came up were due to the quarantine and people having time to look back and reflect at, this isn't right. How we were doing this wasn't okay, and it's not okay. I think as an industry, we need to do the same thing and look at our industry and realize that, yes, it's tragic that we are losing these things, but whatever we can build it better.
We need to change the way that our industry functions. We need to find a way to provide healthcare and benefits and have a better life. I'd like to think that maybe coming out of this is the change that we need, like a wake-up call of we need to figure out what's happening. We need better. We need to pay people better. We need to charge for food. Because if we don't, nothing is ever gonna be sustainable.
The restaurant community is in my heart, and it's just gonna be a very different landscape when this is over.
Like so many people, I have such a love for the restaurant industry in Pittsburgh. I have a love for the people that work in it, the people that are creative, the people that grow the food, the people that go out, the act of doing it, the act of community. And so even though it's hard, we're going to find a way through this, and we're Pittsburgh, and that's what Pittsburgh does, is Pittsburgh comes together and finds a way to get through things. And so, in a year when we look back on this, hopefully we're all going to be in a place that we've grown from this as much as we can, and we've supported the people that need support and that need help, and that we get through this together.
the people in the hospitality industry are a very special, talented breed. They work the hardest, they work the longest, they fight the hardest. They wait on a 6-table section, like balancing a tray of drinks, remembering 25 different specific types of orders, and do it all with a smile. And if there's any type of person that can come out through on the other side of this for the better, it is the people in the hospitality industry. I think that sometimes they just need to be reminded that they're that strong and that they do this every day, and that this is just one long shift in the